Hey everybody, it's Josie. Welcome back to Cedar Creek Homestead. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Well, we are in the middle of a heat wave here. Nothing's changed from last week. Those storm clouds blew up and got big and promising, and we didn't get a drop of rain. And so we're watering our gardens. I guess everybody around here is. The ponds are slowly shrinking, and I'm hoping that we're not going to be in the same shape that we were in last year, but if we don't get any rain, it's getting pretty serious pretty quickly around here. And I know out in the panhandle of Oklahoma and other areas of Oklahoma are even drier than we are, and I know that some of you in other areas of the country are experiencing the same thing. And then we hear from others that are having a lot of rain and a lot of issues, and so just all kinds of craziness going on. But we're all working hard to get our gardens through the summertime where we're harvesting and able to put things up, and that's really important for us to do this year. And we'll all just keep working, keep getting up every morning and doing what we need to do to make things work. I thought today we would kind of discuss what you would do, you and your family, if all of a sudden everything came to a standstill. We couldn't go to the grocery store, you couldn't go anywhere else to get supplies without really strict and heavy restrictions on your movement, on your purchasing, on where you went, how far you went, and all of that. It seems kind of funny in this day and age, and especially with us being really built on being a country of freedom. It seems really strange today to be talking about freedoms, being able to move about the country and purchase the things that we want to purchase. But there was a time in this country, not too long ago, in our grandparents' days, when they had rationing during World War II. Now, they were going through a time that had come out of World War I, and things began to look better. And then the stock market crashed, and the Great Depression started. They had the Dust Bowl days. And then all through that, they began to recover at the end of that, and World War II broke out. So there were some very difficult times. There are a lot of people that really had some difficult times. Now, my grandparents, my grandma in particular, her when she was a young girl, her family, they were Arkansas. My grandpa's family were from Arkansas as well. And my granny and her family, when she was a young girl, they migrated from Arkansas to California, and they worked in the fields picking fruits and vegetables. She picked green beans and all other kinds of vegetables, and they were there for several years picking and making ends meet that way. And then they moved back home to Arkansas, and after she and my grandpa met and married, and after a few years, they ended up back in California for a little while, and my grandpa worked as a dairyman at Knott's Berry Farm. And then they moved back to Arkansas again to raise their young family. But a lot of the country in those days migrated from Arkansas, from Oklahoma, from parts of Texas out to California to find work and to do things, because there were such horrible conditions in these states through the drought and through the Dust Bowl and through the Depression, all the things that just made it impossible for them to be able to work their farms or even to have jobs in town to make ends meet for their families. So by migrating out west, they were able to relocate and to pick. And from what I've read in the history books, a lot of people actually stayed out there, a big percentage of them. And there is quite a few people that have roots in California that have roots from Oklahoma, people that moved out there during the Dust Bowl days and remained out there. Some came home, some stayed. So I got to thinking about my granny and my grandpa and those that have gone before us and the things that they had to do. And I'm always looking back at the books and the recipe files and all of the things that they did to make ends meet, and how they stretched their budgets, and how they did all that they could for their families to survive. I love looking at old pictures and history and all of that stuff. And one of the things that my granny had, she had this big old box that had pictures in it. And one of the things that she had in her collection was her ration book. And that ration book was always interesting to me. And I went through the history of it and how all these things came to pass. And I thought that I might share a little bit of it with you, and then discuss some things that could become real possibilities for us today. Now, the government issued these ration books during World War II. The very first ration book was rationing sugar. These commodities were being used to send overseas to our soldiers so that they were able to eat well. And it became obvious that here in the United States, people were going to begin to panic over shortages and price increases. Terms that, as I was reading and studying about this, I thought how interesting it is that it parallels with today. Rising food cost, panic in the people that that particular item is not going to be there. And so they instituted these ration books and gave people just a certain amount of sugar for their families to last for the entire month. Now, I don't know all the specifics 100%. My granny's no longer with us, so I can't really sit down and get all the answers from her. But you might know some people that could give those answers to you, and probably further research would pull out every the fine print details of each of the ration books and the stamps that were in them. But it started with sugar, and then we know that it increased past that, or went past that, to include coffee and milk and cheese and a whole list of other items, food items that were rationed for individuals. An interesting thing for me that I thought was interesting anyways was that fruits and vegetables were never rationed. Now, they were hard to come by, perhaps, and maybe not even available like some of the fruits that we enjoy today here in places that we're not able to grow. For instance, here we can't grow citrus fruit. Maybe citrus was harder to come by here in those days because the trucking really wasn't what it is now back then. And so, of course, there was shortages that way. But as far as having fruits and vegetables to eat, they say that there wasn't really a shortage as far as them seeing any kind of reason that they needed to ration fruits and vegetables. And so those never did make it into the ration books. But the government did encourage people to raise gardens, to grow a backyard garden. Even if you lived in the city, and if you didn't have a backyard, you lived in areas, where people could come together and raise a neighborhood garden, a community garden, and they encouraged that. The U.S. government also encouraged people to raise rabbits and chickens in their backyards. Well, for one, rabbits and chickens don't require as much food. There's not as much waste that you have to be concerned about. And they really do, especially rabbits, have a really good turnover as far as the amount of food that you give them, the amount of meat that you get back from them, and they reproduce rather quickly. Those that lived in the country in those days, of course, had beef and pork if they were able to afford it. And sometimes living in the country and being a farmer and raising beef didn't necessarily mean that you got to enjoy the beef yourself. Sometimes you had to sell the beef to be able to provide the other needs for your family. But occasionally people would be able to enjoy the beef and the pork that they were raising themselves. And then they also have the benefits of the lard and the other items that they would get from those animals. Besides rationing food, the government also rationed gasoline and fuel and tires and different kinds of rubber. Now, in my studies, not everyone got gas rations. You had to prove that you had a reason for that gas. I guess, you had to certify your work, your distance, all that kind of stuff. Plus, in the rationing, you could only own 5 tires. My question is, after all of that, how would you and your family fare if by chance we got up in the morning and the federal government said, okay, because of all of the mess that's going on, the high prices that we can't seem to get control of, the high gas, the high fuel, high diesel, all of the different things, and the constant runs on the different items. Whenever there's a rumor that one thing is in shortage, everybody runs and gets that thing. Because of that, the fear of hoarding, the fear of people having to do without, we are going to try our best to redistribute the products to make it fair for everyone, redistribute the wealth, so to speak. How do you think you and your family would fare? If it was just thrust upon you all of the sudden, and you were faced with that in the morning, it just blindsided you, that no longer could you just go down to Walmart or one of the other big box stores or your local grocery store or wherever and get anything without presenting these ration stamps. And this is what the government says that you and your family can have, period, for the month. And when you use that up, you're done. You have to make it go all the way to the end of the month. How would you do? Myself, personally, I don't want to rely on the federal government to say, here is a ration book for your family, and this is what we think your family needs or requires to make it from month to month. I want to be able to say what my family needs and what I can provide for my family, and that's why I'm working, and that's why you're working right now to look well to the ways of your household. Well, you can see from World War II that it wasn't just food that was rationed. It was these other items as well. They had a need for aluminum, and they had rubber, and all of these different products that were in shortage, and they were all rationed. And people had to just make do with what they had. And so I think that we are in a season of making do. I really think that we should challenge ourselves to live that way, not in fear, to embrace living below our means. There's no reason why we have to get a paycheck and feel like that we have to spend every dime of that paycheck to justify who we are, to make ourselves feel better, to make ourselves feel like we're held in higher esteem in our communities, in our group of friends. We should be loved and admired, and our relationships desired because they want to be with us as a person and not by what we have or what we can do for them. And you should be that way towards them. They should be your friends because you love them, because your relationship is a good and loving and kind relationship, not based on what they can do for us, what they can give us. That's not an honest relationship. So ask yourself, what would your family do? Well, one thing I know for sure that my family could do is learn to love the leftovers. And we've talked about this before. Learn to love the leftovers. Many times we turn our nose up at the things that were left over from one night to the next night. And maybe some of us that are responsible for cooking the meals, maybe we need to say, okay, we can turn that into something else. And challenge ourselves to come up with another way to use that item. Maybe you make another casserole using part of those ingredients and making something new. Pinterest is full of ideas. There's tons of cookbooks. Go to the library and check out a book. All kinds of things. And the internet, these YouTube channels are full of ideas of people giving you ways to reuse your leftovers or to stretch the items that you have, to make ends meet, to make do with what you have. Stop buying and start making. Stop buying all of the items pre-made. Start figuring out, if you don't know how yet, learn how to make things from scratch. Learn how to make bread. Learn how to make homemade mixes, cake mixes, gravies, homemade hamburger helpers, homemade rice-a-ronies, all these different things that can really help you pull the items in your pantry and extend it and stretch it out, but also give your family, especially your children, a sense of eating things that they're already familiar with. Start fixing those things so that your children and your husband and you yourself are accustomed to that. So that if and when things just bottom out for us, your family's not in shock and thinking, what are we going to do? You're already used to these kind of meals. Every once in a while, try making water gravy. Now, some of you may have never heard of water gravy. And I'll be honest with you, I thought it was a normal thing. I didn't realize that people didn't know what water gravy is. And it's basically making gravy. Of course, you have your oil, whatever it happens to be, whether it's bacon grease or whatever you're using for your oil, and your flour and your salt and pepper. But instead of milk or cream or whatever it is that you use for a base for your gravy, you use water, and you thicken it up, and you use that as gravy, and it's a water gravy, and it tastes just fine, but it'll kind of stretch your budget just a little bit. Every once in a while, try that. Get you some sliced tomatoes fresh out of the garden and make you a pan of gravy. Pour on the top of it. I don't care if it's water gravy, if it's poured on top of fresh tomatoes. I love it. Something that I read that they did during the Depression time was they kind of pooled their resources. So everybody got their rations for the month or whatever it was, or got their ration books, and then they go and purchase their groceries whenever they need them. They would go to their local grocer. In those days, they didn't have big grocers, of course, or at least in the rural areas. You had little hometown grocers just right up the road from you, and they went and they purchased their allotted goods, and and throughout the month they would go in and they would buy ration. If they didn't make homemade bread, they got their bread, or they got their cheese, whatever it happened to be. And by the end of the month, when everybody was running out of ration stamps, they would get together with their friends and their family members or their church members, and they would say, well, I've got this, or I've got this, or I've got that. Kind of a modern day real stone soup kind of thing. Remember the story about stone soup? So they would bring those things together, and the women would get together and make a meal. And one lady would provide something, and somebody else would provide other things. Maybe they picked some produce out of their garden. Maybe somebody had some peaches come off of their trees, and they were able to make, with just a little bit of the sugar that they had rationed, a peach cobbler to feed everybody. And they came together and they fellowshiped, and they had a good meal. And perhaps they just encouraged one another to keep working, keep pressing through these hard times. And that's what we're going to have to do too. We might be able to, I have one thing and my neighbor has something else, and another neighbor has something else, or my church family members come together and have a ham and bean soup dinner in this season of Make Do, which is where I think we are, making do. We need to look at those binders. Once again, I've reminded you several times, or I have to remind myself too, look at our binders, look at the things that we know we want to have, and make sure that we have those things on hand. And then, should it go that way, we can make do. Clothing is another area that we can for sure save our money by making do with what we have. We don't have to be fashion plates. We don't have to change our style every time Hollywood dictates that our style should change. We can be a little bit behind what they're doing and save some money. Learn to do some things that kind of changes up the look a little bit. Maybe you could put some tucks in, or maybe you could put some pretty embroidery on some of your little girls' clothes, or put patches on the knees of their breeches, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you pass hand-me-downs to the kids. And one of the things that we've done here, and for a long time he didn't do it, but Blade has taken his daddy's overalls, and he's wearing those to do chores around the home and stuff, and it makes me smile thinking that he's wearing dad's overalls, and he's getting a good use out of it. So always look around you and see what you can do to make do. We don't always have to have the newest car in the garage. We can make do a little bit longer with what we have. In these times, I would hold on and not spend a bunch of money if we don't need to. Be wise about our spending. Be wise about our choices. Be willing to step out of our comfort zone just a little bit and eat some of those leftovers that we wouldn't normally eat. Try something new. Now, I have to be honest with you and say I don't like peas and I don't like cilantro, and I don't think my taste will ever change on those. But I'm growing a garden and I'm growing things that I like to eat. And so I'm not too worried about having to eat green peas. But we all need to be doing that. Keep the things in stock that your family likes to eat, and keep the things that you can cycle through right now. It doesn't always have to be you're stocking things for tomorrow or next week or next month. That's good and important, but be eating through those things too. Cycle back through them. It's a perpetual thing, kind of like your toilet paper supply. Keep working through your toilet paper. Put your new to the back and use the old, and you will never have to use the old stuff because you're always using the new and the fresh. Make do with what you have. You know, sometimes I think we let pride get in our way just a little bit. We think that we have to have the newest and the greatest and the best. You know, when I think about people being stressed out, ulcers and heartburn and fear and stress and all of this stuff because they're worried about what they see. The prices are just soaring. All the stuff is going crazy. And they're actually physically making themselves sick. And really what we need to do is step back and say, okay, these are the things we can't change. These are the bills that we have to pay. But these are the things that we can let go. And these are the things that maybe instead of going to the movies, we need to stay home and the family together enjoy playing a game, or going out inside and spending time in the yard talking and laughing, and go to the river, go to the creek and put your feet in the creek, or doing those kind of things, making choices, making decisions to make do with what you have. We can all do it, each and every one of us. I hope I've encouraged your hearts to look around you and to make do in this season of making do. To really examine your life from morning to night and look at the things that are expendable, the things that, if tomorrow things change and they said, okay, we're giving you a ration book, and all of a sudden those things weren't rationed and you couldn't get them. How are you going to do? Are those things important to you? If so, I would stock those things. If not, then I would learn to make do with what I had. If you have to have a certain brand of ketchup and it's going up to $5, almost $6 a bottle in some places, I would learn to eat a cheaper brand of ketchup, or learn how to make ketchup homemade, or learn to like something else. There's always a way for us to get around it. I have put mustard, ketchup, chili powder. I've done all kinds of things when I was a kid to make beans taste better, because we had beans every week, 2 or 3 nights a week. We had beans. And we went through a lot of ketchup and a lot of mustard and a lot of other things to try to make those beans. It wasn't that the beans didn't taste good. It's that we had them all the time. So we had to think of ways to make it work for us. And so we would change it up and have beans and cornbread, or we would have beans and fried potatoes, or bean soup. And that's what we need to do again, is find ways in this season of make do to make do and enjoy it. We can make it through it. Fellowship with others, and each of us pitching in and providing a little bit for the meal is a fun thing to do. It's an encouraging thing to do. It's fun to come away from a meal with friends and family and know that we truly enjoyed our time spent together. Okay, guys, till next time, this is Josie. I love you guys. I really do. Try to stay cool. It's really, really hot outside. Pray for rain. Pray for rain. We need it. And find some joy in this season of making do. If you have to sit down and color in a coloring book with your kids and grandkids, find some joy in this time. Don't stress. De-stress. If you're stressed out over how in the world you're going to keep up with everything and everybody else. Then step that back and make a decision that you're not going to try to keep up with everybody else. You're just going to live the best way that you and your family can. I love y'all. I really do. Keep looking well to the ways of your household. And until next time, we're gone.